So I'm joined today by Adam Brimo, the CEO of OpenLearning. Their ticker code is OLL. So Adam, thanks for joining us for the chat. Would you mind letting investors know about OpenLearning? For those who don't know about the company, how would you describe the company briefly?
OpenLearning is an AI-powered learning management system. So what that means is we provide the core piece of technology to education providers so they can build and deliver their courses and programs either online, face-to-face, or a combination of the two. We work with about 250 institutions worldwide and about 5 million end users. And we started the company about 12 years ago. We listed on the ASX in 2019, and we've now started growing much faster as we've expanded around the region.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And so for institutions that are using your product, what's the thing about your product that is the biggest benefit? Like, what's the catch for them?
Yeah. So there's a few sort of themes that have come together. So maybe I'll share a bit of context around the market. So we primarily work in the higher education space. So universities, colleges, professional development, corporate training, these sort of lifelong learning areas. Now, particularly focusing on the higher education sector, most of these institutions have, and in many countries, have been using some kind of platform to deliver their courses. And when I say deliver their courses, typically that means uploading documents, sharing slides, running quizzes and exams, these kinds of very simple things. Now, over the past sort of 5 to 10 years, people want more. They want more engaging online learning experiences. So when we developed OpenLearning, we focused on building a platform that enables organizations and institutions to deliver more engaging learning. That includes project-based learning, collaboration, experiential learning, interaction, building a community. So rather than just watching a video, you can actually do a project and get to know other people. So that engagement is one key differentiator. That's from the education side. The other is that there's a big trend now towards short courses and micro-credentials. So a lot of institutions, in addition to offering their 3-year and 4-year degrees or 2-year master's degrees, are also offering short courses and micro-credentials that they're selling to the public. Now, when institutions look at offering these, they typically look at getting a new platform to do it. And in Australia, a lot of OpenLearning's customer base are using OpenLearning to deliver these short courses and micro-credentials. However, institutions then have multiple platforms, right? So they have one platform for their on-campus and accredited programs and another for their online learning. Now, what OpenLearning does is we actually are one platform that can do all of this. Through OpenLearning, you can both build and deliver short courses and micro-credentials, including promoting the course, taking payments for the course, issuing the credentials, managing the learners, getting the analytics and all of that, in addition to running all of your on-campus courses and programs. So OpenLearning actually is an end-to-end solution. It replaces probably 5 or 6 different systems that an institution would need to put together to actually build and run these types of courses. I'd say first, our learning experience we offer is something that institutions want to do. They want to move towards project-based learning, outcome-based education. The fact that our end-to-end platform actually replaces like 5 or 6 different systems that an institution uses means they can save substantial amount of money, and they don't have to worry about integration. And the third key point, which is a newer one, is generative AI. So OpenLearning was very early in building out our generative AI tools in the platform, and we focus on generative AI for the educator. So making it easy for them to build their course, generate content, facilitate the course, provide feedback to students. And we've started rolling out these tools over 2 years ago when GPT-4 first came out. And now all of our customers are using them in the platform. And that's really increased the uptake. So now, over the past 6 months in particular, we've seen significant traction as we've expanded our market from just a platform for online to a learning management system that handles any type of course. And as the generative AI tools in the platform make it much easier for people to build and deliver their courses.
Good answer. Very comprehensive. So there's 2 things that really stand out for me with the company in terms of edges that I'm quite interested in. So the first one is engagement, which you've kind of touched on already, that engagement piece, like getting people more involved in that online delivery and giving them a closer experience to what they would have if they were, at the university in class. And then the other thing is that AI, which you just touched on as well. So I think on both of those fronts, you've, if not explicitly stated, you've at least kind of alluded to the fact that open learning is ahead of its competitors in those two spaces. Where do you see the company, like who are your competitors and where do you see the company in the competitive landscape at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the market that we're playing in, there's kind of two markets, which is partly why this becomes quite interesting. So one market is the learning management system market. This is a software as a service, cloud software as a service market. There are a number of companies like Instructure, Blackboard, Moodle, that provide their systems to institutions worldwide. They're billion-dollar companies. They've been around 10, 20, well, more than 20 years, most of them. Now, that market is quite large. Globally, it's probably a $50 billion plus market. We estimate in the markets we operate in, it's about a $500 million plus market based on our model. And that market is, I would say, quite traditional. Institutions buy these platforms. They just do one thing. Usually they deliver the content and manage the assessments and all of that. The other market is what we would consider to be the lifelong learning market. And in that market, you have platforms like Coursera, FutureLearn, edX. These are more consumer-orientated platforms. The institution doesn't so much purchase those as they put their courses on the platform, like you might put your song on Spotify or something, and then those platforms take the course to market. Now, that's not suitable for an education business that wants to build a large business in that space, because pretty much you're signing away all of your rights and control and everything to that platform. Similarly, with the learning management systems, the challenge is they're quite siloed. They're limited to one institution. And these days, learners are learning from lots of institutions, and they want to take that learning with them. So OpenLearning occupies this space where we compete with the traditional learning management systems when we're selling to an institution to be their platform for all of their courses. On the other end, we sometimes compete with the lifelong learning platforms when institutions are looking at taking their courses to market. But because OpenLearning can do both of these, institutions look at us and say, oh, actually, this platform solves both my needs, and it allows me to keep control of what I'm doing, but also gives me access to a global marketplace. So we occupy this, I think, a space in between, which isn't served. And what we're seeing now is that institutions are looking at the face-to-face learning experience and thinking that, well, although the students are coming face-to-face, I want to give them a commensurate experience to what they would get if they were online. They want to be able to access everything online. They want to be able to come and go as they please. And they want that face-to-face learning to seamlessly interact with the online learning. So we're competing with traditional companies primarily when we sell to institutions because our business model is focused on software as a service. So institutions pay our fees for our platform, but institutions are seeing the value in having one platform that can do all of these things.
Okay. And on the AI front, like what does the AI actually do for your platform or do for your customers?
Yeah, it's a good question. So one of the biggest challenges a lot of institutions have, education providers and even corporates, learning and development, is building engaging courses, or even building a course at all, whether it's engaging or not, just actually getting a course to market. So if you think of one subject in, say, an MBA program, a typical university, if they're going to put that course online, might spend 3 months putting one subject online, and they might have 2 or 3 people working on it: subject matter expert, a learning designer, maybe a graphic designer as well. That whole process might cost anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. It's a wide range, but it depends how much work they want to put into it. And there's a lot of back and forth between all the parties. So this process where you're actually building and setting up a course is actually one of the biggest impediments for institutions to adopt any platform or even move online with their existing platform. So our AI tools are focused initially on that space. We created what we call an AI course builder. And the AI course builder follows the standard research-backed approach for building these types of courses. You start with the course objective, which is what you're trying, the goal or the objective of what you're trying to teach. It moves on to learning outcomes. Every course has learning outcomes at an institution. And the outcomes are, what the person is supposed to be able to achieve when they complete the course. And usually there's 5 or 6 of these, maybe three to 6 outcomes. And after that, you move on to the structure of the course. And the structure will be a list of modules and topics that you'll go through. If it's a 12-week course, you might have 12 modules. And inside each of those modules, you'll have content, activities, assignments, all the stuff you would do in the course, group work, all that kind of thing. And the course builder takes you through each of these steps. And at each step, you actually, as the educator, can choose your preferred learning framework for implementing these. So for example, when you're setting up the outcomes, you can specify that I want a project-based learning approach, and it will generate outcomes aligned to project-based learning. And there's about half a dozen of these, like Bloom's taxonomy, Solo taxonomy, all the academic, approaches. Similarly, when you're generating the structure of the course, you have another set of frameworks to choose from, things like backward design, the ADDIE model, problem-based learning. So these are all very familiar to academics and educators. But the challenge is to implement these previously, you need to hire a learning designer, and you'll be paying, $1,000+ a day in Australia for this learning designer to implement these approaches. And then you'll check them over, and then you might decide you want a different approach. You have to do it all over again. So this course builder is actually acting like an expert learning designer and also a subject matter expert, because at the end of it, it generates the content for the course based on these approaches as well. So it's actually doing cross-disciplinary learning design. And that saves, what we've seen so far, it saves 80% of the time in building these courses. And that obviously translates into an immediate cost savings. It means that institutions get courses to market faster. And what we've seen so far in the market is when universities have benchmarked what we've developed in our AI course builder versus the AI tools in other learning management systems, OpenLearning comes out on top, because we've designed it with this learning sciences model in the platform. And that's something that I think other technology companies haven't done, maybe because they don't have as much familiarity with the education side, and they also don't quite know how to do that part, but we worked that out. I suspect everyone will eventually work these things out. Maybe we're 6 to 12 months ahead in that area, but obviously we're adding new things, so we'll always try and be ahead.
Yeah, staying ahead is obviously the constant challenge. I want to switch gears a little bit. So the company has one very large investor. Can you take us through that relationship and how that's kind of contributed to OpenLearning over time? Obviously, for investors, one very large shareholder can be somewhat scary as well as a good thing. Like you've got good backing, but it also means that you've got one shareholder with a lot of power.
Yeah, so the Education Centre of Australia, they invested in OpenLearning 2021, early 2022. Yeah, 2022. It's on the ASX, so you can double check, but it's been about 3 years, I would say. And over time, they've grown their shareholding in the company, partly because they're funding the growth of the company and the development of the technology over the past few years. And their support has been invaluable, because I think for these kinds of companies and for what we're trying to build, there's a significant investment required in building the technology to the point where it can compete with established billion-dollar players. Because it's one thing to say we're ahead in AI, and institutions love that, but then they still have a checklist of 100 things they need the platform to do before they can adopt it, right? So you've got to tick off every box, and then you've got to give them something new and different that they don't have. So building all of that out, getting that to market, that's required time and money, and we're very lucky to have found the Education Centre of Australia, and they've supported the company through that development over the past few years. Now, the other great thing about ECA is that they're also in the education sector. They actually have a few parts to their business. They're an Australian company. They're a managed campus provider, so they actually operate university campuses on behalf of universities. So, for example, Victoria University's Sydney campus is managed and run by them. University of Tasmania, Melbourne is managed and run by them. And they also own 3 higher education providers in their own right. So because they have experience in the space, they understand the value of what OpenLearning provides and is building. At the same time, for these campuses, they also recruit international students from around the world to come to Australia. And that means they have actually staff in about 20 different countries around the world. So through that network, we've started making inroads into India and the Philippines. The Philippines this year, as you've probably seen from our announcements, has been going very well, and we've signed a number of great contracts over there to establish ourselves in the market. So ECA's support across both the go-to-market, the funding, and the strategic positioning has been extremely valuable for us. I'd say the good thing about them is because they're strategic, and ECA itself is actually owned entirely by its founder, Rupesh Singh. It's an entrepreneur-driven company. So as a fellow entrepreneur, he understands the journey and he knows that it takes time. And he's both supported us, but the company is also still run independently by the board. So I'd say that we've got a great balance and we've got a great partner in ECA. And I think particularly in where we are in the microcap, nanocap space, having that kind of support and understanding, I think is extremely valuable and quite rare.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it does look like a quite beneficial partnership after digging into it a little bit, and to see that they're still buying, they continue to buy into OpenLearning, so they obviously believe in the company. And the great thing is they're insiders, so that should give investors a bit of a boost of confidence that you guys are doing something right. So you're getting into the enterprise training market as well, right? So Alcom is one of your acquisitions that you're pushing into.
A partner of ours, partner.
So that's a new deal that you've got happening. So they're going to be distributing your products around the world. How is this different to the market for universities? I know you've touched on this a little bit as well, but can you just go into, in particular, just the positioning, the product positioning? Like, do you have everything you need to be competitive in this new market, or do you think you're going to have to be building new stuff, or are you ready to hit the ground running?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there are differences in the markets. Obviously, universities and higher education providers have a specific set of needs, and those needs are actually more complicated than I would say the corporate training requirements, because running a university, it's a core business of the university, right? It's quite a lot of things you got to do. That said, there's a slightly different set of requirements for the corporate space. So you can probably think of it as a Venn diagram. Some things which are unique to each, and then you've got an overlap in the middle. Now, one of the reasons OpenLearning fits well into this space, in the corporate space, is because since we started the platform, we actually started off as a platform for professional learning and lifelong learning. So the idea that you could take a university course and move that online and distribute that to thousands or millions of people around the world. Now, that use case is actually very similar to what a lot of corporates want to do, whether it's training their customers, training their internal staff. They actually want to run short courses that are easy to access. They can manage them, they can get the data and all of that. So we've actually always had a set of corporate customers using OpenLearning. It's a small percentage. I think if I had to say, maybe it's probably 10 to 15%, somewhere around there, of our customer base. But it means that we meet a good set of these requirements. Now, there's probably a few additional things that we will be adding to our roadmap to make sure that we're competitive in the corporate space. Like, there's a few reporting things that we probably don't have quite yet, and maybe a couple things, but they're not complicated. They just haven't been a focus because the focus was on universities. So the exciting thing with Elcom is that they already have over 200 clients, primarily in Australia. And a lot of these clients, they do have corporate L&D, or they're running training programs, or some of them even have a business running training on the side of their core business. So what we find is that in the corporate space, it actually fits in with our higher education and lifelong learning market, because a lot of what we do at universities is also delivering lifelong learning.
Okay, and so this is it's a bigger opportunity for you guys, right? I believe it was about $400 million total addressable market compared to I think you're calling the university market 64 million as your total addressable market. Is that about right?
Yeah, just in the 3 countries we operate, and by applying, our pricing model, which is substantially less than what the existing players are charging. So we're disrupting both from a feature perspective and a price perspective.
Okay.
But yeah, we believe the corporate space is actually larger, because every organization has a corporate L&D function, every sizable one. And then you get overlap between these functions, right? So it's like a company is offering training to their customers, but those customers are also using another platform for their internal L&D. So the same individual is actually covered by probably 5 platforms, in a lot of these companies.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I imagine there's, potentially the opportunity to move even out of the education space, not necessarily in the short term, but down the track, there's probably a lot of overlap with things like HR systems, different things where you've already got a lot of the technology in place. Not suggesting you go down that path right now.
So one related area, which and we've mentioned this in some of our presentations, is around the employability side. So talent recruitment, that area, because one of the great features of OpenLearning is that because everyone has an OpenLearning account when they use the platform, that account stays with them beyond the institution that they're taking a course from. So, if you take a course from, a short course from one university, you have an OpenLearning profile. The data from that course goes into your profile. So all the certificates you've earned, the projects you've done, what we call a portfolio, that's there hosted on OpenLearning indefinitely for free for you. Then you take a course from another institution on OpenLearning, that data also goes into your portfolio. So we're building up this lifelong learning portfolio and profile of a user over time. And we believe that is extremely valuable from a recruitment perspective, because you have people now who are changing careers more frequently. So, in the past, where you rely on their previous work experience to determine if they're a good fit for the role, now they might have 20 years work experience, but it's in a completely different area. They've now gone back and done some short courses and they're retraining to work in a different space. So how do you assess them? Well, one way is to look at what they did in the courses and what projects they've done and how they interacted with people. And that's data that we have. So over the years, we've been building up this very large database of profiles, and people are already using their OpenLearning profiles to apply for jobs. So that talent and recruitment space is one that we eventually will move into.
That is interesting. So you guys might end up competing with LinkedIn or something like that.
It's like a variation of that. Yeah, LinkedIn gives you a record of someone's work experience and self-reported data. We give you their verified learning data, so you can see what they're capable of.
Yeah, and so that kind of fits into, I know you've talked in some of your reports about the ecosystem, right? So, and that's kind of what you're touching on there. The learning management systems, the marketplace, and the portfolios kind of all working together in sync to give you guys a bit of a competitive advantage. I want to just switch again a little bit and talk about the financials, because obviously small cap companies, micro caps, cash is always super important. You guys are still burning cash at the moment, and we can get into that in a little bit. But firstly, the annual recurring revenue impressively has grown 14 consecutive quarters. What do you think is driving that consistent growth? Is part of it a structural shift to online that's, and just a bit of a system growth that you guys are riding? Or do you think you're growing quicker than your competitors and you've got something special that's behind that growth?
Yeah, thanks. So I would say that it's a competitive market. So although there's lots of platforms out there, right? So we have to compete and we have to be better than the other ones. In addition to the big ones, there's a whole bunch of small ones. So I'd say the market itself has some growth, but the level of growth is not huge. So what's driving our growth is a few things. One is, the unique features we have are making us more competitive than some of the other companies. So we are winning customers at a faster rate. Second is that we are expanding the countries in which we operate. So most of our business had been focused on Australia and in Malaysia in the higher education sector. And this year we've expanded into the Philippines and we've been winning contracts there. And we've also been winning contracts in the Australian corporate and Malaysian corporate space as well. At the same time, we've expanded the use cases the platform can handle. So most of our customers, up until even a year ago, were using us for just short courses and micro-credentials. So pretty much just online education. The learning management system market at the universities is a much more difficult one to tap. And that's what we started expanding into this year, because only now have we had the functionality we need to compete in that space. And since we've got that functionality now, that's how we're winning larger contracts. And that's why you've probably seen us announce larger contracts this year than we did last year, because We've got the functionality, so we can now sign up a university for 10, 20, 30, 50,000 students, whereas before we'd sign them up for 500 or 1,000 students in their online programs. So those are some of the reasons. The other is our go-to-market has improved. In December last year, we got a chief revenue officer on board who has about 20 years experience in the space, and he was one of the first employees of Instructure, which is the largest learning management system company now in the world, and he helped them grow in Australia. I think 10 years ago, when they first entered, he helped them grow from 200K to 20 million in ARR when he was there for 5 years. So he's now running, the revenue side of our business, and he's made a lot of changes, and that's starting to flow through, and we're seeing really positive results from that. So I think there's a few things that have come together to help us grow the company and drive that growth. But I'd say, there's still a lot more work for us to do, and we're quite committed to growing even faster than we're growing now.
Sounds good. And as we mentioned before, cash, obviously always important. You guys are still burning about $1 million every 6 months based on your last reports. But that is decreasing, and you're obviously running quite cost light. You obviously have a very small business in terms of your costs. So cash break even, like cash flow break even, what actually has to happen, do you think, for you to hit that cash flow break even? Is there a revenue number? Do you see it happening in 2026 potentially, or is it more like a 2027? Can you give us some just guidance around how you see that cash burn playing out and getting to break even?
Yeah, so we haven't provided any guidance to the market on when we'll get to break even, but obviously looking at the reports, this is a key focus of the company, given where we are. So we've made great progress over the past few years. We've sort of jettisoned some of the other divisions that we had that weren't making as much money. We've focused on the software as a service business, expanded the core platform. We have a very small team. As you can tell, we're pretty much running a listed company competing with billion-dollar companies, spending less than $5 or $6 million a year in total. So it's quite a challenging thing to do. We've even improved our gross margins over the past couple of years while doing that. So that's allowed us to go on this trajectory where our losses on a half-yearly basis, like we put in the last presentation from a cash perspective, are decreasing quite quickly. So we expect that trend to continue. We haven't provided guidance, but we do expect to get to break even sort of in the near to medium term. And that doesn't require any, I'd say unrealistic assumptions of growth. We obviously hope our growth rate will improve, and we think if it can improve a bit further, then we'll get to break even, in the near to medium term. So there's, I'd say, a lot of opportunity in the market now for us, and what we have with the platform is allowing us to get larger contracts more quickly. I think one thing to keep in mind with this kind of business, like a software as a service business, is that the cash flow is usually better than the P&L might suggest, because customers are paying upfront annually in advance for their contracts, but you accrue the revenue 12 months going forward. So when we sign contracts, we often get paid, in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, you get paid for the first year upfront, and they're always paying that way. That's why I guess you look at a lot of tech companies in the US and you look at their actual P&L, and they don't seem to be making any money, but you look at their free cash flow and it's usually quite high. So I think that's the kind of business that we're building.
Yeah, well, that's why the annual recurring revenue number is quite helpful to give investors a bit of an insight into how that cash flow should look going forward. So you've mentioned the Philippines, and obviously you're winning a lot of business there. You've mentioned India. I noticed you guys are also targeting like countries like Vietnam as well. Is your focus going to remain on the Philippines, or are you going after everywhere in Asia? Like, where do you see the biggest growth coming from over the next 12 months?
Yeah, over the next 12 months, I think it'll be coming from our existing markets, Australia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. There's still a huge opportunity here. The other markets we are doing the groundwork in, and we have some early customers, but they will take time. And I think one of the slides that I recently put out to the market is showing, where each country is in their adoption of learning management systems and their propensity to spend. Because I think it's not consistent across the world. You've got countries like Australia, the US, Singapore, UK. Institutions, corporates, they're used to paying quite a bit, and they're used to using 100% SaaS products. You don't have to go in and sell them on the benefits of cloud and software as a service. Whereas there are other countries, like for example in India and Vietnam, where most universities actually are not using any learning management system at all. And if they are, they're using an open source one that's hosted on premises. As soon as they move that on-premises system to the cloud, then they see the real costs of running, the system. When it's on premises and they're buying the servers or taking them from the IT department, they don't really record the cost, so they don't really know how much they're spending. Once they move to the cloud, then they start moving to SaaS. They realize, actually, there's a cost here. How do I optimize that spend? How do I get the best value for my money? So different countries are on this journey at different points in time. And Australia, obviously, high income market, it's already there. It understands SaaS. We sell the benefits of what we do. We look at the costs, and there's a good fit. In Malaysia and the Philippines, they're obviously not spending as much as Australia on a per capita basis, but the numbers are larger. And at the same time, they're a bit further on that journey than a country like Vietnam or India. So in Malaysia and the Philippines, some of them institutions have already adopted software as a service LMSs from the US. Many of them are running open source, but on the cloud. So they know how much their cloud costs are. They've been managing it for 10 years. They want something better. So because of that, the sales cycles are shorter in Australia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, whereas in countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, India, the propensity to spend is lower, and their adoption of technologies, of SaaS LMSs at least, is not as fast. So that means it'll take us longer to break into those markets in a big way. But if we're there early, then we'll be the first option when they get there. So that's how we see the world shaping up. These other markets, we're doing the groundwork. Things may come, but the growth in the next 12 months will still come from the existing markets.
Is there a bit of a domino effect? Like, is it a matter of once you've got your first big customer, then other companies, other institutions in that market see what you're doing and it becomes easier to sell, or is each sale equally as hard?
Oh, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. So getting your first institution, at least in the university in a country, is very difficult because although you think it's technology, it should work everywhere. They'll say, well, how do I know it's approved by the government? Will the regulator get upset if I use this platform over that platform? So, and then there's local reporting requirements, and there might be local ways of teaching. So getting the first one is challenging, and getting a foothold in the market is challenging. So once you have one, getting the second is easier, and the third is easier than that. So the exciting thing is where we are in Australia, we have, obviously, we've been here, we started here. We've got a good track record. We work with lots of institutions. In Malaysia, we actually entered Malaysia 10 years ago. We were the national platform for massive open online courses in the country for about 4 years. And then we moved into the private sector, and we've been signing up a lot of private institutions. So that was primarily just for online short courses and MOOCs. So now we're expanding that into the LMS market. So we already have relationships with half the universities and colleges in Malaysia. So we're doing a land and expand over there. Philippines, we've now signed up, I think at the latest count, probably 6 institutions at least, using our LMS for all their students. And we're going through the onboarding processes for all of them at the moment. So I would say now in these 3 markets, we've got really good traction. And getting the next institution is easier than it certainly was getting the first one.
Yeah, that sounds good. What do you think is your biggest challenge? What's the biggest challenge for the company at the moment?
The biggest challenge is probably balancing, I'd say, the competing demands of each element of the business to grow. So where we are now, ideally, we'd want to invest more in technology and product, right? Because AI is moving quickly. There's so much more we can do. There's so much on our roadmap. And we know if we had more functionality, then we'd be able to service a wider range of customers. On the go-to-market side, we've got a great sales team in place, but we'd like to expand that too. But it takes time for a sales team to generate a return because the sales don't come immediately when you add new salespeople. And also you've got to increase marketing spend and all this. At the same time, we want to ensure that our cash burn reduces and we get to break even. So we're balancing, I guess, all of these elements to try and optimize, the path to break even while also growing the revenue, maintaining product leadership in certain categories. That's a challenging thing to do, certainly at our size, but we think it's necessary to balance that at the moment because we are a microcap and we don't have access to, a huge amount of capital. And we also don't want that much more dilution. We have to be very mindful of that. So we believe we want to get there and then we can grow more sustainably.
So it's the juggling act. It's a good old juggling act. So if we put aside your major investor at the moment and pretend they don't exist and pretend they're not an option in answering this question, if there was one, like, do you see any companies out there that have really strong synergies with OpenLearning, that if there was like one company that could buy you out or you merge with, who would that be, or what kind of company would it be?
I mean, I think I probably can't look at specific companies, but I think the categories we look at, because I think one of the values of being listed is that you do have the opportunity to make more acquisitions and mergers and things like that. Because our market cap is still quite low, that limits the opportunities we have. Also because in the private market, people usually value their company more than they do in the public market. And they'll hold out for that valuation, and sometimes they'll get it, sometimes they won't. So, we're trading at a much lower multiple than most private edtech companies. So it makes it difficult to do those things. But if there is a couple of categories that we think are relevant, and I think we've mentioned this in the past as well. One is student management systems. Student management systems are a core piece of technology at every institution, every university and college. And we often integrate with these platforms, and we often get asked if we have one ourselves. People want to use, they want everything to come together. So we have partnerships. But I think the student management system category is one where there are interesting opportunities. I think that said, student management systems aren't as they're not as globally scalable as you probably want for technology products, because each country has a lot more of its own requirements. So usually there's a lot of localization. Like each country has its own dominant student management systems for the most part. I think that's an opportunity. The other is in the student recruitment space. So because we have a large marketplace on OpenLearning, we also do promote courses from our clients. And we also have websites like the Uni Guide that attract international students from around the world. So companies in the international student recruitment space is an area that we also think are a good fit, because that's another challenge universities have. So pretty much we want to be the core technology provider to universities and institutions going forward.
Another acceptable answer would have been a business with a lot of cash, I guess.
Well, that would also be useful.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, that's a good answer. That's good insight, I think, on the student management system. So, a lot of investors obviously are generalists. They're not, experts at education. So it's good to get that insight from you on the obvious fit. You've obviously been running this company for a little while. How do you stay motivated? And what have you learned in this process for yourself? Or what's the biggest takeaway that you've gained?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we've been on quite a journey. We started off just over 12 years ago, myself, David Collian, and Richard Buckland. David's our CTO, founder of the company with me, and Richard was an academic at UNSW. So for the first 5 or 6 years, we focused on being a MOOC platform and growing the user base and building the brand around the world, particularly Australia, Malaysia, and Southeast Asia. Then we transitioned the platform's technology capability to short courses, micro-credentials, online degrees, and now into a full LMS. So I think the expansion of the product and the use cases, as well as the markets, is something that really excites me. Also, seeing the impact of what we're doing, where millions of people around the world are using our platform to learn, and they're learning in a more engaging, more effective way, having a direct impact on improving the educational outcomes and solving problems for institutions. I think one of the exciting things in the past couple of years has been generative AI. Many of the challenges we had from adoption and technology perspective for the first 10 years of the company are now being solved with generative AI. And that means people can build better courses faster, provide better feedback to students, better results. And I think that's something that's been really exciting, and I'm really excited to see where that goes. And as you can probably tell, even beyond that, looking at things like talent search and profiles and portfolios, we see natural expansion from the technology into these areas. So I guess from a thematic perspective, I guess I generally believe that, core technology platforms in certain verticals are where the opportunity is going forward with generative AI. I think a lot of little SaaS products can be replaced by AI, just using ChatGPT. You don't need them anymore. ChatGPT can do most of this stuff, or will be able to do it, or Gemini, or Claude or whatever. But core platforms in certain verticals, the functionality of these platforms will expand significantly. They'll leverage generative AI, and they'll become like the operating systems for these industries. And that's where we see open learning and the opportunity. So I think that excites me from a technology and adoption perspective. Signing up new universities, getting them on board is really exciting. Seeing the impact of what we can do, and expanding into new markets. Because we're going into markets where they don't have that much at the moment, and we're a leapfrog technology. They don't have to go through the adoption cycle that happened in the US and Australia and the UK. They can skip a lot of the pain and suffering, and jump straight to something that actually works.
So they can bypass MS-DOS and
That's
get
right.
up to the AI generation. It is quite exciting, I think. Like, there's probably a lot of businesses that are sleeping on the AI thing at the moment, and there's going to be a lot of disruption. And I don't think we've seen even the start of it, really. So
I agree.
it is, very exciting time. So I'm conscious of time, so I won't take up too much more of your time, but just one final question. So what would you want a new investor to know about OpenLearning that isn't obvious from looking at the financial reports? And just on top of that, if we sat down in 3 years' time to have another conversation, what would the success case look like to you? Like, what would we be talking about that you've achieved over the last 3 years?
Yeah, good questions. So I would say, for a new investor coming in, I think it's important to understand the barriers to entry in this kind of market. It's not trivial. The kind of platform OpenLearning is and what it can do, you couldn't build that today for $50 million, and get the customers that we have. So, the value of the company is far below replacement value. On top of that, it serves a core need, and it serves a core customer base across, multiple countries. So the strategic value of the technology and the opportunity that it presents is quite significant. I would say the revenue has lagged the importance and the value that the product creates for a host of reasons. One is we started off in the MOOC space, which is free courses. We moved to short courses, which are also cheap courses. And now we're finally in the segment of the market where the customer spends the most, because they're delivering significant value to students. So I'd say that will hopefully accelerate our revenue growth from there. And we haven't had the right sort of sales team in place until now in the right markets. So I would say that the strategic value and the replacement value of the technology is quite high. So I'd encourage new investors to look into the market, look into these kind of contracts. And these are the type of customers that they won't be with you forever, but they'll be with you for 5 or 10 years because we're delivering their core business. And I'd say second to that, if we jump fast forward 3 years from now, we would expect OpenLearning to have a much more significant position in the Philippines. In Malaysia, we currently work with over 40% of the universities and university colleges. Obviously, we're expanding our contract values there, but we want to get to that point in the Philippines as well. We want to be at that point in more markets, at least probably a few more markets by then, to have that kind of penetration. And I'd hope that we've also expanded into some of those other areas like talent search, employability, student recruitment, so that we're providing that holistic solution and that our revenue has gone beyond just the education sector.
Perfect. Good answer. So, Adam, thank you so much for joining us for the conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And if there's anything else you wanted to leave people with?
I think I'd encourage everyone to subscribe to our newsletter. I'll follow the company. I think it's rare that you get an insight into technology companies at this stage, but I think the ASX provides that, given all the disclosure. And usually we try to be quite upfront about our thinking about different things. And, in the announcements, I usually try and articulate the strategic value and the proposition of what we're doing. I'd say keep in touch, follow along, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.